Okay, we are reconvening the public session of the Oregon Government Ethics Commission meeting. Great. Okay. We are going to address agenda item 4 on the public session agenda. We do not have anyone appearing, and so Investigator Sullivan, are you prepared to give the report?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Payne and Commission. This is Investigator Josh Sullivan for the record. I'm presenting agenda item number 4. This is a default final order for Salem Mayor Julie Hoy. The default final order states that between February 1, 2025 and February 14, 2025, Julie Hoy participated in the convening of a meeting with a quorum of the Salem City Council through serial communications and by acting as an intermediary. The convening of the meeting occurred outside of public view and without compliance with the public meetings law notice and meeting minutes requirements. The matters discussed at the meeting were within the jurisdiction of the City Council to deliberate and decide, and included topics involving the city's leadership audit, City Manager Keith Staley's performance, and whether to terminate City Manager Keith Staley's employment with the city. The recommendation is to approve the default final order, finding that Julie Hoy committed one violation each of ORS 192-630 1 and 2, ORS 192-640 sub 1, ORS 192-650 sub 1, OAR 199-050-0015 sub 4, and OAR 199-050-0020 sub 1 and sub 2. The default final order imposes a letter of education in lieu of a civil penalty per the penalty matrix.
Thank you. Any questions for the investigator, commissioners? Any discussion on this matter before we move to a motion? Seeing and hearing none. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For agenda item number 4, I move the commission approve the proposed default final order as the final order in this matter, and the chairperson be authorized to sign it as such.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioners, you've heard the motion on public session agenda item 4. Administrator, please call the roll.
Commissioner Mettler.
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson.
Aye.
Commissioner Burke.
Aye.
Commissioner McCulley.
Aye.
Commissioner Helt.
Aye.
Commissioner Resendez Gutierrez.
Aye.
Chair Payne.
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Okay, on your agenda, there's a staff advice that's for information only. Those can be helpful to review, but nothing that we need to consider at this point. So we'll proceed to the trainer's report, agenda item 6.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Payne and commissioners. This is Trainer Ruth Sylvester for the record. In addition to trainings all around Oregon since our last meeting, we have completed a manual audit of our website for the upcoming compliance update. And we've updated most items on our end to be compliant with the OGEC 2.1 criterion. And we're working with Tyler Tech for the items that are on their end. So we'll have an update for you at next month's meeting with a more complete timeline. And the Q1 issue of the Ethics Matters newsletter went out to your inboxes after the book had already been printed. So you should have received it by email. And we'll include a copy in the next meeting book. We do thank our newest staff for jumping right in during SEI season. SEI season is moving right along, and all of our staff are participating in that SEI filing call rotation. And our training calendar is full through April. We're booking training requests for May and beyond, and many entities are already submitting their requests for late summer and fall.
Great, thank you so much. Executive Director Myers, please proceed with the Executive Director's report.
Thank you. Before I jump into my report, I wanted to add to the training report that Casey and I and Bob Steringer, who has appeared before us many times, did a CLE last week for the Marion County Bar Association on navigating OGEC's complaint process and then hearing from Casey and Bob sort of for attorneys how to work well with the Ethics Commission, what works, what doesn't work, etc. It was a lot of fun. Okay, so I do have things to talk to you about, and the budget information is there. The first thing I want to talk about are our legislative concepts, because our deadline to submit them is today, and that is what Becky will be doing after the meeting. I wanted to go over some of them, see if you had any questions, and then there's one or two that I particularly want to make sure you're okay with before we proceed any further. So the first one is giving OGEC the authority to accept electronic payments of fines and assessments. We currently do not have that authority. It does take legislation. We can't just decide to go do it. We do not get to keep any of the money, but what this does is it then gives us the authority, we may have to adopt rules as well, but to give people the option of paying by electronic payments, but they will have to pay the additional fee for the processing costs. Because we don't want it to come out of our budget and all the money paid ends up going to the general fund. The second one is one I'd like your input on, which is right now for preliminary review, the PR stage opens the day it's filed or the motion is made and ends on the day that I sign it. That's the 60-day period. And then we hold it until the next meeting. But right now, the investigation period, the 180 days, opens on the day of the commission vote and ends 180 days later, meaning we have to take it to the commission within the 180 days. The difficulty this has caused lately is once we moved to the monthly meetings, the 180 days will always, the commission meeting for that is always going to be 3 to 4 weeks earlier because of 31 days in a month. So we've had a couple cases where 180 days is expiring like 3 days before the next commission meeting. And if they agree to time waive it, just to wait those 3 days, that's great. But if not, the investigator basically has to give up almost 4 weeks of the investigation period. And given that, we are proposing that we amend the statute to have it operate the same way as the PR phase, meaning the 180 days begins on the date the commission votes to move something to investigation. We must complete the report and sign it. I would sign it within those 180 days, but it could then be presented to the commission at the next meeting following the 180 days. That's what that proposal is. The third one, as I was discussing with Commissioner Thompson in the break, in last session, there was a new disclosure provision added to 244-120 sub 2 that allows governing body members to vote on a budget that may include their own compensation or that of a relative. They have to make a disclosure, but then they can participate and vote. The change that we are proposing is 1, to add member of a household, because that got added to the conflict definition last year. And 2, to clarify that it's not just the city council or whatever the final vote, but it would include the budget committee discussion and vote. The fourth LC is to clarify the language in the honorarium statute. We are not changing the substance of the statute, but it is as currently drafted, a very confusing statute because it starts with, you're not allowed to accept any honorarium, and then later, but there might be an exception if you're doing it in your official capacity and it's less than $50. It just is difficult. So the fifth, as you will recall earlier, sometime last year, we had a case that clarified, the Pritchard case that clarified if you are a paid employee of a nonprofit, it still does not count as a business with which you're associated. Because when you look at those phrases in sub 3, business with which associated, it would have to be a private business, closely held corporation, or publicly held corporation, and a nonprofit really can't be any of those. So we are proposing adding another provision there to specify that a nonprofit that you are a paid employee of would count as a business with which you are associated for purposes of the ethics laws. And then the sixth one is the one I most wanted to talk to you about, which is increasing the maximum statutory civil penalties for violations of the ethics laws. Currently, any violation of one of the statutes in ORS Chapter 244 has a maximum civil penalty of $5,000 per violation. There are some additional provisions like an intentional and willful violation of 040 could be at $10,000, so it's doubled. Those typically only come up with like embezzlement cases where someone is stealing from their government agency. All of those laws, this is something that was brought up by Commissioner Mason before he left. And all of those laws have not been changed in 20 years. So 20 years ago, in 2007, the penalties were raised from $1,000 to $5,000. So our proposal is that all of those penalties, 20 years have passed, that they be doubled. The penalty matrix will still apply to all of our cases. So when the matrix assigns either a letter of education, that would be the same, but a civil penalty for a case. Typically, it's 1 to 20% of the maximum statutory violation, sometimes 20 to 40%. It's simply that those calculations, instead of being 20% of a $5,000 violation, it would be 20% of a $10,000.
Is that what you're suggesting, that it be increased to, is $10,000 maximum?
Yes.
I know you mentioned before that like Chicago has a $25,000 maximum violation. Are there other states that you can compare us to as to where we are in comparison to what other states have as maximum violations?
We can, I don't, so what, in our meetings with at COBOL conferences, which is where this comes up, a lot of the other states actually have criminal, like they authorize the Ethics Commission to then bring criminal cases in conjunction with their Attorney General's office. But yes, we won't submit the initial proposal, but we can do that sort of survey to see if what we are proposing is within. I just know anecdotally from my conversations that most people, when we said $5,000, were like, oh, that's not very much. So. Any other questions? That was the one where I did want to get a sense from you. Are there concerns with us proposing to increase the civil penalties?
No, not for me.
I have a question.
Mhm.
We had talked several times about enabling legislation to let us issue a letter of education at the end of preliminary review. Is that something you guys looked at all?
I didn't look at it in terms of a legislative concept. I do think there may be ways to accomplish it through, I mean, we can always issue a letter of advice, whether we call it a letter of education or a letter of advice. If the commission dismisses a case at PR, there's nothing that would prevent us from issuing a letter of advice to the people that would include all of that education.
That makes sense.
I think a letter of advice requires.
I think, without having looked at it,
Yeah.
I believe that's accurate.
And then the last one is that everyone has agreed, given that public meetings law is a bit of a wild card right now, so that we will have a placeholder LC just on hold should we need public meeting law legislation in the long session. So are there any questions or concerns?
Commissioner Halt?
Thank you, Chair Payne. So we could always issue the letter of advice, or is that new because of the new law?
It has nothing to do with the new law. I do know the prior director very much opposed sort of doing that. He wanted the cases, if you were going to be issuing a letter of education, to be moved forward. But we can certainly take another look and see if we can accomplish the same thing that has been suggested without requiring legislative change.
I think that would be really important because going back to the 180 days, some of these cases, I feel like there is a consensus among the commissioners that they just want them to have the education. But then you have to do all this investigative work to get to the letter of education. Could you eliminate some work and accomplish the same goal? Because when you talk about amending the investigation period for 180 days, I really think people deserve to have their case heard in 180 days. I understand the issue with the way the meetings fall, but is there a way to set our deadline earlier so that we could not have it go over? Just not sure that I support moving that longer because I wouldn't want to see it move too much longer. But 3 days, I understand and I get the difficulty of that.
The dilemma of trying to adjust when your meeting dates are, we would still always have the same problem because the date 180 days is going to run from whenever the original meeting date was. So, and there is currently the provision where we can extend it by 30 days, but the meetings are almost always 31 days. So that doesn't solve our problem. We did try to extend that in legislative concepts last year, and it didn't get even a hearing. So I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of, I don't want the respondents to have their cases drag on longer than the 180 days. We're trying to find a way to make it work so that the investigative period isn't shortened significantly, but not have it drag out unnecessarily.
I'm just wondering if you could take the 180 days and calendar the ones that are going to not make the next meeting and prioritize them and have them be more like 150 days so that they fall on the meeting before, because some of them will fall that way to the amount of days that they have with the meeting schedule, but others won't. And so I'm wondering if there's a way to prioritize those so that you don't have to extend it, but you could still meet it and not cut down on investigation times. If that made any sense.
Right, it does. I think we already do a lot of that prioritization. The dilemma is simply the caseloads, as you well know, that the workloads for the investigators are significant. And, if they're working on a case. Some of the more complex cases, you're going to need all 180 days. And you don't want to just, none of our investigators have the ability right now to like focus solely on one or two of their cases when they may have 50 to 60 cases at any one time.
Well, and when you're fully staffed, that might be, that might be an option, but you've been down investigators and certain people have been out on leave and it's been a challenge and that happens, right? So, you know, I don't think it's, for me, I think this could be a potentially good solution because you're still completing the investigation within 180 days, meaning you're signing off that the investigation has been complete within 180 days. You're just allowing the commission to then consider it at the next meeting. So I think it's still saying we're completing the investigation within 180 days. It's not lingering on forever, but it allows the commission to decide it at the next meeting versus the meeting has to be within that 180 days.
Correct. And in most cases, the next meeting is, as I said, literally within a week or less.
Yeah.
Because of just the calendaring issue. And it may, this is an LC, it may be difficult to get this through. I can't promise that this would even become law, but I think it's at least a first attempt to try to fix what is a problem.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts from Commissioner Halt?
Thank you. I just had a follow-up question on, so when people embezzle, it's really hard not to look at the outcomes and look at, say you've, you know, somehow gotten yourself $200,000 more, but you're getting a $5,000 fine. That's like a really good return on investment for those people. But I always assume that when there's money being thefted, that they will be prosecuted for that as well. Am I incorrect in that?
Not yet. No, you're not incorrect. Almost all of those types of cases end up being opened as own motion cases because we read in the newspaper that this former public employee has been indicted. So realistically, those types of cases, there is already criminal prosecution that is taking place. And we're kind of the afterthought often of, oh, and not only did you violate the criminal statutes, but because you were a public official and you took something in the course of performing your public official duties that you weren't entitled to, that's also a violation of our statutes. So our penalties have nothing to do with any criminal penalties that are already being imposed.
However, there are times where people are indicted, but the criminal, they're not pursued criminally, or there maybe isn't enough proof to for them to be convicted. So I do think it's important that, you know, our standards are lower than beyond a reasonable doubt. And so we may be able to find that they violated ethics laws, even if there's not enough proof for a jury to determine beyond a reasonable doubt that they committed crimes. So I do think it's important that we not just depend on criminal statutes, and we always look at what our own penalties are.
Well, we can go above the cap because we have.
Yeah.
You can go above the penalty matrix.
But how did we issue $100,000 fine to somebody? Didn't we do that at one
I
point?
don't recall any $100,000. We did a $20,000 fine,
Which would have been above.
but it wasn't because there were multiple violations.
Oh, multiple violations. Okay. At the risk of digging back up, what was so the Kids Hopper thing was,
It's all right. I think it was 20,000 in the end, and then 12 for Sylvia. The Rousing case was $20,000
but that was because we sacked on multiple violations.
because they
Gotcha.
were,
Okay,
right.
fair enough.
It was still the $5,000 per violation.
You can also do twice the amount of the,
Yes, if they actually got financial, like the embezzlement and so forth, there is a statute in there that we can recover additional civil penalties in the amount, is it twice the amount of the
twice the amount. So
monetary gains?
We have lots of
Technically, we
options.
could do 100,000 if
Yeah.
they got 50,000. We've never done that. Kids Hopper was 20,000. We did do some crazy high one, but it was like decades and decades ago, like really long time ago.
Thank you. Good.
I'm personally comfortable with where the fines are if we have the ability to up them for embezzlement. Thank you.
You don't need any motions or votes.
I
You
don't
must.
need any motions. This is informational. I just
Okay.
kind of gauge where the commission is at, but my next topic of discussion is SEIs. It is SEI filing season from March 15th to April 15th. And when I checked last night, so we have never had a commissioner fail to file their SEI by the deadline. And I do not want to be the first here. So I checked last night and there were 3 of our commissioners who had not yet filed their SEIs and 1 whose SEI was marked pending. This morning, the pending one filed. So as far as I know, there are 3 of you who have not yet filed your SEIs. The deadline is next Wednesday. For me, the deadline is going to be Monday. If you have not filed by Monday, I'm going to start calling and nagging you. We do not want to be the ones who fail to file. Okay, so
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I think I called Susan 3 times when I was filing my SEI. So.
well, and frankly, I'm not sure I was that helpful, but our staff has been taking calls all month long. Like that's why Casey left the meeting. But today's a big call volume day. We will file for you if you want us to. Just have you on the phone to answer questions. But really, our goal is just to get people filed. So if you are one of the 3, and I'm not identifying anyone, if you are one of the 3 and you need help getting it filed, give us a call, please. Okay, a couple other things on my list of things to talk to you about. We received notice and heard from the governors, and I'm going to mess up the name of this group, Office of Executive Board and Commission Appointments. I don't know what they're called.
It's just the executive appointments.
The executive appointments, people at the governor's office. We heard that several of our commissioners did not complete the mandatory workday training modules that were due by the end of December. This annual training is mandatory and completing it is identified as one of the expectations for the position. So, and you will have to do all this training again this year. It is important that you do it before the end of December. Now, right now it is set up for everyone to just log into the Workday account and take the training and get it over with. If that is a problem for anyone, we can help you in terms of logging in. We have also had commissioners come into the office and do the training here. And vaguely, years ago, we used to actually do the training en masse as a group, but that was admittedly back when all the commissioners were sitting around this table. So again, it's April, you have 8 months, you all need to take that mandatory training in Workday. Additionally, commissioners will have some additional training, agency training expectations, particularly in light of the changes to the public meetings law. As many of you will recall, when we first got public meetings law and did the rules, and then Stephanie and her team developed the training on public meetings law, we held a special commission meeting on a Saturday, and all of you got to sit through our public meetings law training. Well, that training will now be kind of completely changed in light of the new law. Hasn't been passed yet, but signed yet, but assuming that it does. Which means that we will have to redo all of the training, we will have to be doing rulemaking, etc. At whatever point when we have new public meetings law training, we will need and be scheduling some training session for all of our commissioners because there are significant changes. And I think that was it. I did want to simply address one thing you brought up in one of your comments about our being fully staffed. We do have the investigator who was on leave has transferred to another agency, and we do currently have a recruitment ongoing to fill the final investigator position. Okay, I think that's it for my ED report.
Okay, thank you. The last item we have is the work session on the draft guide for public officials.
So, as I explained in when I sent you all this draft public official guide. It is, as I did warn you, it is long, 90 something pages. This work session is our opportunity for anyone to ask any questions, make suggestions. You can, of course, still send questions or suggestions. I do know it's a lot to work your way through. The main point of the update, we are required to update the guide every 4 years. This time around, the main point was to make the guide easier to navigate, more accessible in terms of readability for an average reader, not for an attorney. Take out a lot of the legalese, provide more examples, things like that. The substance of the guide is not significantly different. We have added sort of new things like the budget vote exception for conflicts of interest. And now that like the House Bill 4161, which allows public officials to accept food and beverages regardless of whether there's a policy, they can just take food and beverages offered by their public body when they're at an official event. That law did have an emergency clause and it was signed a couple days ago. So that is in effect now. I will add it to the public officials guide before the commission has to vote on it at its next meeting. But I wanted to give all of you an opportunity to ask questions or raise concerns. We did get some edits and suggestions from our DOJ counsel, some of which I'm rejecting because they're just putting back the legalese language that we were trying to take out.
It is their job.
Executive Director, I have a potential edit/change. I think there is a mistake on page 61.
I found that too. I
Yeah,
was like,
okay.
Okay.
The bottom
Thank you. Me
paragraph,
three.
it says, if you approve the application, I think that's supposed to say if you reject. And then the next sentence says, if you reject the application, I believe that's supposed to say if you approve the application. I think they're just reversed. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Was that the correction you both had as well?
100%.
Okay, okay. And then I had a question. Since this goes out to public officials and the laws are about to change, and we only I guess, approve this every 4 years. Are we going to make edits to this once the laws are changed, or how does that work?
So this realistically only provides guidance on Chapter 244 laws.
Okay,
So the changes to the public meetings law, we don't have to change this.
Okay.
Because that's realistically the written guidance on the changes to public meetings law. Our DOJ council get to redo the guide, their AG manual on public records and meetings, but that's the Attorney General's problem. In terms of any additional changes to the ethics laws, to the extent that they are now law, we will work it in. Yes, we need to update this every 4 years. That we have not always been good about that. We're trying to do better on it. The actual goal will be to potentially change how the guide is even produced, but that takes time and resources that we just have not had right now. But so that would be then something that could be more easily updated as we go along. The dilemma, of course, is it still holds the position of a commission advisory opinion, which is why the commission must vote on it.
so it has an effective date, which it's good only as of the effective date, is my understanding. Okay.
It will not be good until the commission votes, which the expectation is that will be at your May meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioners have comments? Commissioner Halt?
Thank you, Chair Payne. So with the legal services that people receive that are pro bono, we receive a few of those cases, but it's really clear that people are allowed to receive legal services in our ORSs. Is it possible to make that more clear? Is there any way to not bring those cases forward because it always seems like they're covered, but yet we have to investigate it to just show that it's covered. It's kind of confusing to me. I'm wondering if there's any way to just not investigate those and dismiss them ahead of time because they fall under something that's clearly stated in the law. And I understand people's confusion with it because they think it's a gift, but it's an exception in the gift. And so I just wanted some clarification and if there was any way to streamline that to take some workload off. Thank you.
So it's an exception if you have. Is it?
Legal expense.
I think you have to have the legal expense trust fund.
Right.
Just double checking the statute here.
And don't you also have to have a policy as well that allows the public body to pay for it as well?
I think she's talking about pro bono, though. Nobody.
Oh, pro bono.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Nobody
Okay.
pays.
So you're allowed to accept it. You're allowed to create the legal expense trust fund, but that has to be approved by the commission. And then the provision of pro bono legal services, what the statute says is that if the services are provided per a legal expense trust fund, it doesn't count as a gift. And then a different statute in 040 says you're allowed to, that it's not a use of office to accept something like pro bono legal services that are provided pursuant to a legal expense trust fund. So what I will do, and I will review the manual to make sure that is explained more clearly. Whether we could not open the cases is a separate question. And in that case, the answer right now under our statutes is no. So long as someone alleges a violation, we are required to open the case. There are lots of times we receive a complaint and we look at it and we're like, no, this should be dismissed. Like, just no, it's not a violation. What they're saying is a violation. But they are alleging a violation of a statute in our jurisdiction. We're required to open it, but hopefully those are things that can be easily explained in preliminary review and then dismissed. I do recognize that increases everyone's workload, including the commissions, but that's the current state of the law. And frankly, I don't know that I want the commission or anyone else to give me the discretion of deciding what cases to open or not.
Susan's all power.
I really don't want that power. So,
Fair enough. So we're not making any decisions today. We're just discussing
if there's
this and giving comment and feedback, and then this will be on our agenda for a vote next month. Okay.
Yes. And so what I would say is taking your comments here and then give you another like 2 weeks if any of you want to submit any additional written comments or feedback or have any questions.
Okay.
Susan, does this go to any of the other groups for comment? I mean, do we get comments from the counties or the cities or any other?
It's not in the past that I am aware of.
But I'm not saying it needs to. I was just curious.
Yeah, no,
Okay, fair enough.
because it's like a commission advisory
Right.
opinion. It's not like we go circulate the opinions
No, that's true.
before they go to you.
You're right.
But
That makes sense.
however, it is in the meeting book, and I have already received a couple comments from people like,
Mhm.
remember the media reached out and was like, I've read this and
Okay. Okay.
Okay, seeing and hearing no additional comments or questions, I think I'll just ask if there's any additional new matters to discuss before we adjourn. Seeing and hearing none, we can now adjourn. Excellent.
Take care, everyone.